Roommate lacks the will to get up on his own. I see a lot of hot-blooded revenge stories lately where huge shitstorms get stirred up and someone gets fired or arrested. My story is cold-blooded revenge, where a very small and deliberate action makes my victim lose out. My first semester at college I had a roommate who was a pain in the butt. He made up on a code rules to tell us we weren't allowed to watch movies or listen to music he didn't like, didn't realize food wasn't his, stayed up past curfew with friends over being loud, didn't help clean the dorm for inspections, and had a consistent holier-than-thou attitude because of his religion. I'm pretty calm, and I rarely ever get even, but after a semester of his nonsense I had no issues with revenge. He was going to study music, but failed the entrance audition to an important class and needed to take another 2 credits in order to keep his scholarship. So he joined the social dance class I was taking at 7:45 AM every other day. A couple weeks in, he decides to set his alarm to 6:15 AM, 15 minutes before I get up. My morning habit is very tight. Wake at 6:30, shower, change, eat, and walk to class, arriving with 5 minutes to spare. His morning habit is: allow the alarm to play for 5 to 10 minutes before turning it off, go back to sleep until I finish showering and come back into the room, then get up, shower, and leave just a few minutes after me, arriving right as class starts. I deal with it for a while, and he even acknowledges that it's probably annoying and I should turn it off since I don't get up anyway. He doesn't. I figured I could use his habit against him. He was essentially Pavlov trained to wake up when I came back into the room, so in the last 2 weeks of the semester, I changed my routine slightly. I would eat before showering. That made it so I came back into the room just a few minutes before leaving and with just enough time to walk to class. He, not realizing it was so late, took his shower and arrived at class with only a few minutes left, getting an absent for the day. The dance department has a very strict rule that 4 unexcused absences is an automatic fail. Roommate doesn't remember this rule. He continues to rely on me coming into the room to wake him up. He continues being absent for the last 4 days of class. His first semester report card gets an F, which brings his GPA too low to get his scholarship the next year. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. How I inadvertently brought down a crime ring. Strap in, this is fairly long. This all happened in 2008. I was 18. I had just gotten a job at a new restaurant basically next door to me the summer after I graduated high school. The owner of the restaurant, we'll call him Ken, was an immigrant from Syria. Relevant later in the story. Ken had spent most of his life in the States managing restaurants in Boston, but moved to our area to help some of his family with their struggling business. In the beginning, things were going well. We had a steady flow of customers and some pretty good food. About a month in, however, things shifted. Ken bought a new Mercedes and house. I thought nothing of it, he just moved to the area 2 months prior. Then things got bad. He closed on his house and made his employees move everything for him. Servers, dishwashers, bussers, everyone. He said if we didn't, we'd be fired. So we did. He then started taking vacations and leaving his head chef, who has never even been in a professional kitchen before this job, in charge. He was overwhelmed and just told us all to fuck off when we had an issue. Fast forward 4 months. Ken is now not paying employees. We started losing a lot of help. It's almost the end of summer and in a few weeks I'd be quitting for college anyway, so I stuck it out. I started working 13-16-hour shifts 6 days a week, which promised good money. I was at this point promoted to head of house and got a raise even though I wasn't being paid. I worked about 3 weeks that way, around 84-96 hours a week at $15 an hour. I then learned that one of my only friends there, a Mexican here on a work visa, had not been paid for over a month. He told me he was afraid of quitting because he didn't want to lose his visa like Ken told him would happen. I was livid. I took my uniform off and stormed to the front of the restaurant where Ken was. It was our dinner rush, which at this point meant 1 or 2 tables of people who'd probably never come back because the food was garbage. I demanded payment for the last 3 weeks, around 3,600 on the spot. He blew up. In front of everyone. Normally I'm passive and would back down, but not today. I was pissed. I told him that if he didn't pay me, I was calling the health board. The tax office. We were all getting paid under the table and no taxes were being filed on the business and the police, and have the place shut down the next day. He paid me. I gave the money to our dishwasher. He needed it more and told him to take the rest of the night and tomorrow off. The next day, I called the immigration office in our area and explained our dishwasher's situation to see if they could help. I set up a meeting with them for him. I picked him up and away we went. When we get there, they asked if I could just fill out a statement to add to his file. Sure. I wrote everything. A few days later, I hear sirens. The restaurant is basically next door, remember? I look outside and see Ken being handcuffed and put in the back of a squad car and the health department bolting the doors. I walk over to see what was going on. Ken was previously being investigated for fraud and my statement was the evidence that set the investigation over the edge. I read in the paper some months later about it. In the raid, they found his ledger which showed how much money he had been skimming from the business, over 6 figures, and he was charged on that. Ken was getting deported back to Syria and the rest of the sister restaurants were getting shut down pending further investigation. They never reopened. So this is the story about how a fresh 18-year-old inadvertently brought down a minor crime ring in my area, all because I was pissed they took advantage of a friend. The bullied kid destroys a friendship between all his tormentors. 2007, 4th grade. That was when my classmates first started bullying me. It started out as just name calling, which I just ignored. But as time passed, the name calling turned to more physical bullying, pushing, punching, gang ups, and whenever the snowy season was around, I was the prime target for snowballs which occasionally had ice chunks or even rocks inside. This went on for years, and as it went on, more and more kids started bullying me. Even kids from other classes in my year were joining in. Teachers knew I was getting bullied, but never did anything about it, beyond giving my tormentors a stern talking to. My parents knew, and did try to talk to my teachers and other kids' parents about it, but it did not help, and again, only resulted in kids getting a stern talking to. And every time some was giving a talking to, the bullying would intensify for a few days because I was a tattletale. The idea of changing schools had been mentioned, but I grew up in a smallish town that only had 2 schools within a reasonable distance. And because of something, those 2 schools did not currently accept transfers from each other. I know this sounds stupid, and it is, but it will make a little more sense later. Fast forward to about halfway through 7th grade. The physical bullying had slowed down and eventually stopped entirely, I suspect, in part, because I was now one of the tallest kids in my year. The bullying reverted back to name calling. But the worst was the fact at this point I was completely alone. I had no friends, and everyone in school knew to just ignore the gloomy, lonely kid. I spent every recess either sitting alone somewhere or walking around the school area, just waiting for the next lesson to start. It was at this point I realized something about my just ignore him status that I could use. No one cared about what I did or didn't know. People would openly have conversations with each other about their dirty secrets while I sat a table away, well within earshot. Soon enough I knew an absolutely stupid amount of secrets that groups of friends in my class were keeping from each other, and better yet, I knew of people who had been told things in confidence and then shared those secrets to others, and I had it all written down. Now this was all still mostly pretty kiddie stuff like, boy said this about boy B, or girl told this secret to girl B, but then girl B shared that secret with girl C, but there was a lot of it. And there were some pretty serious things mixed in too. Now, the reason why those 2 schools were not accepting transfers from each other was because there was currently a years-long process of merging the 2 schools into one, under a new name. What was actually happening is that because the other school's building was becoming moldy, to the point where kids were getting sick from how bad the air inside some parts of the building was, it had to close down, and my school was getting a massive expansion to accommodate the increase of students. Calling it a merge just made the transfer of students and school staff easier. Because the school was getting a new name, all the students were on paper transferring to the new school, and because of that students could not transfer between the two. Hence the something I mentioned earlier. It's dumb, I know. Anyway, the merge would happen between the school years 2011 and 2012, and this meant that the students from each year from each school were gonna be rearranged into new classes. For my class, it meant that after 8th grade, no one knew if they would still be classmates. So on the last day of 8th grade, every student from my class was called to the assembly hall first thing in the morning. They were gonna have assemblies for each class in the 8th, 7th, and 6th years that day, but they stopped after my class. The principal gave a speech about welcoming the new students and not letting this hurt the friendships we had already established with each other. I had to fight my own urge to laugh while the friendship part of the speech was going on because I was planning something good. At the end of his speech, the principal asked, "Do any of you have something to share?" and allowed students to come up onto the stage and talk into the microphone. Some gave heartfelt goodbyes, some even cried, some just made dumb jokes, and as the last one, I grabbed my stuff backpack, jacket, etc., walked onto stage, grabbed my little notebook from my backpack, and started reading, out loud, every single dirty little secret into the microphone. All the little betrayals, all the broken promises, all the things no one wanted their friends to know about. A year and a half of me just sitting nearby and hearing things was brought out into the light. It started before I was even done reading. The two teachers that had accompanied us to the assembly and the principal were desperately trying to calm things down. Best friends were screaming and yelling at each other, some were getting physical, beating each other up, chairs were getting thrown. It was chaos. It was so much chaos that no one stopped me from just grabbing my stuff and leaving through the backstage exit with the biggest fucking grin on my face I've ever had. I left school grounds and went home, and I don't know how that situation ended. When 9th grade started, the merge had happened. I was put in a class with none of my old classmates. None of my old teachers taught my new class. I managed to make a few friends among the students from the other school, and never saw any consequences for what I did. I don't know why the teachers let me get away with it. Guess they understood why I did it and just wanted to forget it happened. What I do know is that none of my classmates were friends anymore, and I do not regret any part of it.